What is going on, gunfighters? Welcome back to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way, with God at the center where he belongs, Judeo-Christian morals and values, and real-world first-hand experience. Today's episode, you likely know from the title, is about the SIG M17, and I guess will include some discussion of the 320. As you likely deduced from the title, I have a love-hate relationship with this gun. We'll get into that in today's episode. First, I'm going to plug in the bio. Before we get to that, I'm just going to say today, if you like this content, consider checking out goodshepherdtraining.com. Who am I? A question we should all ask ourselves. I am, first and foremost, a servant of God, made in his very own image, a follower of Jesus Christ, a simple man called by God to the Great Commission to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Next, a little bit about my background and what God has allowed me to do and blessed me to do in life. Grew up what most would consider very poor in the backwoods of the southeastern and mid-Atlantic United States, hunting and fishing. Joined the Marine Corps at 17. Did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. So a decorated Marine Corps combat veteran. Infantry assaultman. After the combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also a veteran of law enforcement. I served with LAPD. I was a sworn peace officer, a cop for LAPD. I worked regular patrol assignments and more specialized assignments. One of those more specialized assignments was warrant service, fugitive recovery. Also had some other law enforcement roles. I am an FBI certified firearms instructor and been certified by another 3-letter government agency in a lot of firearms and training things. I've also been a private contractor, worked in the private sector, pertaining to tactics and gunfighting and protecting America from enemies foreign and domestic. I served as the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area. That was our primary mission, to stop active shooters, which sadly are a thing in America today. I've also been blessed to do quite a bit of competition shooting. Started my first formal competitions even before joining the Marine Corps at 17. I had won more shooting competitions than I can remember. I have competed in all manner of disciplines in shooting. I've been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion, West Coast regional champion. Like I said, been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. Mentioned hunting. I've hunted to put meat on the table starting when I was a child. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide, hunting and slaying all manner of beast. And I don't apologize for that. Humbled to be the host of 3 podcasts. Simple Man Sermons, Alpha Male Podcast, and Gunfighter Life. Obviously, as things not mentioned, I've been blessed to do many other things. But, again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, a believer and follower of the Bible, the Word, Jesus Christ. And I don't apologize for that. With that, let's transition into today's the M17. Oh, the M17. How I long for the days of the M9 Beretta and lament her passing. Now, if you know, because you've listened for any length of time, in fact, we just did an episode last week, but I've said it long before that I think the M9, the Beretta 92, is the finest combat handgun ever fielded. Period. So obviously I can't think that about the M17. Now, we talked about a love-hate relationship in the intro. I'm going to start with the hate part, and then hopefully we end on a better note, the love part. Let me say that most things I have against the SIG M17 really have nothing against the platform, the actual gun. To be fair, I think a large portion of why the military went to the M17 is they're getting it at $209 at cost. I'm not saying cost is not important. I'm not saying that I want tax dollars wasted, but I'm saying when you look at all the millions and millions of dollars, what one fighter jet or development of one fighter jet program costs or one aircraft carrier, I'd submit that handgun that our U.S. Marines and soldiers are carrying into combat maybe is not a place to pinch pennies, but I also pay taxes, so I get it. But I will submit this question: did we pick the best tool for the job or the cheapest tool that would get the job done? Did we pick the Snap-on wrench or the Harbor Freight wrench? And another reason that may surprise you if you listen for any length of time, know that I'm not the biggest fan of Glocks. But I honestly think for this role, the Glock would have been a better choice. I know some of you just fell back in your chairs if you've listened for any length of time. I've never said the Glock is a horrible handgun. I'd say it's a very reliable, robust handgun that lacks elegance and fit and finish, but that's not super important when you're giving it to a tanker in the Army. A big reason I think that the SIG got the contract is the modularity. And I think that's kind of overplayed as somebody that's been in the U.S. Marine Corps and the U.S. Army. I know how the armory window works, per se, especially from the outside. I doubt they're going to say, hey, Private Smith, come here, let me measure your hands. Which grip module feels the best for you today in your life in your role as a machine gunner? They're likely going to do something like Private Smith's going to be walking up to the window after just getting yelled at for something he may or may not have done wrong, make him sign some kind of armory card with a serial number on it, and that handgun's going to be issued to him. I fail to see where in all but the most niche of circumstances that modularity is going to come into play. I just don't see it for the majority of soldiers and Marines. Perhaps the Air Force would do something like that. I've never served in the U.S. Air Force. If you can hear that ruckus in the background, that is my a little over, I think now, 110-pound, 11-month-old Rhodesian Ridgeback Alexander Hamilton, who has probably come to about the end of his patience for my podcasting today. So I don't think the modularity is as big a thing as it's being made out to be for the military. I'll get to more of that in the love part of this episode. Now, to give credit where credit is due, the Small Arms Solution channel, if you're not familiar with that, he did a whole thing on the recent contract and bidding and this new M17 going from the M9 to the M17. By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, a matter is established, so make sure you substantiate all the things in there if you're taking them as true. But it's a very interesting video, or I think maybe 2 videos. Anyway, very interesting if you just look up Small Arms Solution and M17. He gets into a lot of the minutia on the trials and contract of the M17. To be fair to the military, technology's come a long way since the 80s, and handgun technology, while I still think the Beretta 92 and M9 is a fine, elegant, and durable and reliable combat handgun, although not as elegant, I will concede that the Glock and the polymer striker fire platform is simpler and has more longevity, so it makes sense. That steel to aluminum slide to frame fit that I really like, and that full contact between the full length of the receiver rails and all that I like on the Beretta also wears down over time. The plastic frame has some significant benefits. I think that the military would not have had a bad choice if they had have chosen the either Glock 17 or 19 just across the board. Either one of those would have been fine. And again, I think a better choice, even though I don't personally like them, it's not about what I personally like. If I was looking at it to equip the U.S. Army, U.S. Marine Corps, all the branches, I probably would have went with the Glock 19, Glock 17. They are a proven, robust system. Nobody's going to argue with that. And again, the modularity, I just don't see that as being a thing for the average enlisted, soldier, Marine. And I have worked on both guns. I have been employed as a gunsmith as well. I don't generally talk about that in the bio. It's not germane, and I have to leave some things out of the bio, or else it would be an entire episode every time. But I have worked as a gunsmith. I have worked on both guns. The Glock 19 is simpler, in my opinion, to work on. It has, and I don't think this is my opinion, you can look up and see the number of moving parts in a Glock 19. Let's just pick one, a Glock, Gen 5, Glock 17 or 19, the number of moving parts in that versus an M17 M18. I do believe it has more moving parts. It is a more complex machine if you look at the way it's put together. It is cool that the fire control unit is modular, but it also seems to be far more complex to me than a Glock fire control system, which includes the frame. Even though it includes the frame, it seems to be to me far simpler. Simpler, especially in a combat gun, generally means better. Not always. Likewise, the upper, the slide, all those firing components seem to be simpler to me in a Glock and easier to work on than the SIG. Even so, let's transition here. I try not to be a Luddite. I try not to shun new technology just because it's new. Likewise, I don't want to embrace a new technology and go chasing after the new thing just because it's new. I don't assume that it's better. And I tried to embrace this. For a while, I was against red dots on a pistol. And then I thought, and I say red dots meaning optical handgun sights, not just a red dot. In fact, I don't believe any of mine on handguns are actually red dot sights. What does this have to do with the M17? I'm getting there. Give me a minute. Anyway, started training with these and running these, and I thought I have to concede after months of actually trying it for myself that these actually are better. Running a optic on a handgun actually is better. Not for every situation, but for a majority of realistic scenarios. It is better. It is faster. It is faster to get good quality, accurate hits. So I wanted a gun, did it out as I would advise you to do, and run one first on a 22 and get a bunch of training and trigger time in with it. And when I decided I was going to go to it, I wanted one in a center fire defensive handgun. Well, I got a good deal, $400 and something on a slightly used M17. And as you probably know, the M17 is able to take optics. So I thought, Eureka. So I bought one and I ran it. And then I went from hate to love on this gun. I really do like it. I think just a simple M17 in its normal guise is fine. And while I don't like the modularity and think it's overblown in a military gun, I think you can overdo it if you're a new shooter, always chasing the next thing. I think if you're an intermediate to good to great handgun shooter, you can really take advantage of this modularity. I didn't change a ton on my M17, but I changed enough to make it work better for me. I like 1911s. I'm a 1911 guy. I put a flat face trigger in it. I didn't change the trigger pull or mechanism or anything. I literally just put a different geometry, a flat trigger face, SIG factory part on the fire control unit to give it a flat trigger. And I put a Wilson combat grip module on there because I think it's better than the M17 grip module. Not a huge difference, but noticeable to me. And more analogous to a 1911 that I like and I'm used to. And I mounted, obviously the reason I got it, I mounted a Trijicon RMR to it. And I really love that gun. It's a great gun. I don't particularly like polymer striker-fired handguns. But I will say, I take away the sentimental value of my Smith & Wesson M&P Pro that I've won more shooting competitions with than any other gun. Strip that away, I would say it's probably my favorite polymer striker fire handgun. I do like it. I don't say it's a better choice for the military, but I do like it far better than my Glock 17. I do like that it's modular. I think for an end user, for a concealed carry person, or for somebody who's limited in the number of guns they can own either legally or can afford, it does have merit. There are new Glocks with the ability to mount optics, but I think that's kind of an afterthought. I've mounted quite a few optics. Again, I was employed as a gunsmith. I think that the SIG, whatever it is, the 320 or the M17s, they have a better optics mounting system. I think it was a forethought instead of just an afterthought. I think it's a better system. I should step back and say, I hope you appreciate that there's no sponsors on this show. You shall take no bribe. The Bible says you shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous. When I was a younger man, I had sponsors. As you may have heard in the bio, I did quite a bit of competition shooting. If you want to be really good at competition shooting and at the top, kind of have to have sponsors, because that's got to be your full-time job. There's a reason I kind of stopped progressing in that. I don't want sponsors. I had SIG at one time reach out and give 6 handguns. Not to me specifically, but to a company that I was representing. They were the early 320s, and I'm talking, this might have been 10 years ago, 12 years ago, somewhere in there when the 320 first came out. And they sucked. They wouldn't run. I couldn't get them to run worth a darn, even regular factory ammo. I think we got 6 of them, maybe more, and they would just suck, to be flat out honest. Put a bad taste in my mouth, not just for the 320 that took years to get over, but for sponsorships in general. If something sucks, I want to be able to tell you guys. That's why it's important for you to support on Patreon. You get an honest opinion, not what somebody's paying me to put out on YouTube because they got for free and they're getting paid to say. But anyway, the early 320s had a lot of problems. Not just reliability, but the fact that they could drop and go off. Something that hadn't really been around since 1903. I'm aware of in any common, military handgun, police handgun. The fact that you could fall on it and have it shoot you, that's a big deal. And a big reason I advocate you guys not adopting something in the first couple of years it comes out. Don't be a beta tester in a gunfight. That's not the time to be a beta tester, guys. So that being said, I think that almost all the kinks are worked out of the 320 and were worked out long before the M17. And M18, if you don't know, the M18 is like the Glock 19 version of the Glock 17. The 17 is a full size. The M18 is what they would call a compact. It's still basically a full-size fighting handgun with a little bit shorter slide. But now that those are worked out and ironed out, and to be fair, a lot of guns when they first come out have issues. It's not unique to the 320. It's not like that's some crazy thing. Glocks have issues from time to time when they come out with a new model. Again, that's why I'm a big fan of not adopting something when it first comes out. Anyway, I think a lot of those bugs are worked out. I think for an end user, as a civilian, as a concealed carrier, even as law enforcement, where you kind of have control and dominion over your own gun in a lot of agencies, you can take advantage of the modularity, where you can mount a decent optic, where you do know what grip size is best for you. I think there's a lot of merit there. I think you get a lot. The fact that if I want to take a Dremel to the gun and make it fit me better because I know how, but if I screw it up, now $40 instead of $400 on a new frame or whatever, that's a big deal. The fact that the grip module is a not super expensive part of the gun, part that often gets modified, painted, Cerakoted, again, Dremeled, filed down. It's a big advantage. Not that I have any problem taking a Dremel to a more expensive gun. I've Dremeled, I think, all of my STIs, my 2 STIs. The first things I did because I know how I want them to fit me. But again, if you mess that up, that's a big deal. If you mess up Dremeling a Glock or an M&P, that's the serialized part of the gun. If you mess up Dremeling, a 320 or an M17, you just spend $40 and get another grip module, or $60, whatever it is with inflation, whatever it costs. It's not a couple of $100. That's a big advantage. A big reason I suspect, and I don't know this for sure, this is purely conjecture, this is not fact, but the trigger on the M17, the 320s, is probably one of the best polymer handgun triggers I have ever felt. Is it a 1911? No. Is it a single action SIG 226? No. But for a polymer striker fired handgun, it is a good trigger. Not great. If you want a great trigger, get a single action. But it is a good trigger. It's far better than a Glock trigger, in my opinion. And I think for the people testing it, that may have had something to do with it. And again, I don't know that is conjecture on my part. But just dry fire to the two handguns side to side. And that's a big deal. Now, if you're a civilian, you can just buy whatever aftermarket Timney trigger or whatever and drop it in your Glock and have a decent trigger. Or if you want to go the cheap route, a different connector and a different spring. But if you're in the military or law enforcement, you're not really supposed to do that, and you're probably not going to be allowed to do that. So having a good trigger out of the box, as they say, that's a big deal. And I think a big reason why it got adopted. And I think for polymer striker-fired handguns, I really can't think of any better. Would I have, if I was in charge of military procurement, picked it over the Glock? No, I would not have. Unless they're privy to some information that I'm not, which is totally possible. Would I now, as a civilian, as an end user, choose it over a Glock? I certainly would. I certainly think from the end user's point of view, it is a better gun. I certainly think in a civilian context that modularity has real merit and real advantages. I certainly think that the trigger pull is much better. Factory to factory gun is much better in a SIG 320 M17 than a Glock. Period, however you measure that. Unless somebody is so indoctrinated into the Glock cult that the Glock trigger is like the only one and they think that's the best. Any other person, you let them dry fire both guns and I think they'll concede that the 320 M17 trigger is better. And that's a big deal when you're shooting. Trigger control is a huge component of shooting well. So better for the military? I'd say probably not, which is why, again, I don't really like it. Better for you as the end user, as a civilian CCW carrier? I'd say probably, yeah. And although I don't think polymer striker-fired handguns are the best handguns, if you're going to carry a polymer striker-fired handgun, I can think of none better than the M17 / 320 M18, anything in that family. It's really, I can't think of a better endorsement than saying it is the best polymer striker fired handgun I can think of. And if I take out sentimental, even better than the M&P, which would be probably my next pick. For a polymer striker fired handgun, if that's what you want, that's what you've decided is the new tactical standard. If that's what you want, I can't think of anything better than the 320 M17 M18 family of guns. Anything in that kind of genus, suborder, whatever you want to call it. They call it personification if you give human attributes to things that aren't human. Do they have a word for if you give animal characteristics to things that are not alive? If there's a word for that and you know it, you should reach out to me and let me know what that is. Anyway, that's just how my brain's working right now. With that, I think that that's a good place to transition out of the main topic. If you like this episode of Gunfighter Life, or any of the other ones, please consider supporting the show. And cheap, easy, free way is just scroll down and hit some stars. If you want to thank me for my service in a real way, and you like the podcast, scroll down and hit some stars on Spotify, on iTunes. Super easy. Doesn't take a lot of time. Literally scroll down and hit some stars. If the platform lets you, write a review. If you want to support financially, because things like this aren't free to put out and produce, and because my Rhodesian Ridgeback Alexander Hamilton is a 110-pound dog and his food is not free, if you want to support, you can become a patron. And you can do that by clicking the link that should be in the show notes, or going there via goodshepherdtraining.com. With that, thanks for staying tuned through all that and to the end of the episode. Usually at the end of an episode, not every time, but most times, I'll give you a tactical tip of the day. Tactical tip of the day: if you're going to run optics on your handgun, just like I recommend on a rifle, I really recommend that you have some form of co-witness. It really helps in the transition from traditional shooting iron sights to running an optic, and it also has the added tactical benefit if your optic goes out. Now, I'm a big advocate of running optics that don't take batteries. I like the Trijicon RMRs that don't take batteries, that are dependent on radiation. So they're not going to get too hot and stop working, or get too cold and stop working, or just have the battery go dead or whatever. But that's fine if you want to run one with a battery. But either way, even on mine, something could happen. It could stop working for whatever reason. Get a system, I don't care if it's on a 320 or on a Glock, where you can see, configure your fighting handgun. If it's just a training 22 or something, don't worry about it. But if you're going to trust your life to it, carry it on duty as a CCW. Have some kind of co-witness system. Another big benefit to this I haven't heard really anybody talk about is, I'll know if my optic loses 0 because I know how it lines up on my iron sights. If it gets knocked off or banged around, I'll be able to see either one of those is not in sync. And that synchronicity can be important. If you're dry firing every day, if one of those systems comes to be loose or off or loses 0, you should know just by looking at it. Something you might not be able to do if you don't have a co-witness system. So if you're going to start running an optic, whether it's on an M17 or even a Glock, consider doing the co-witness thing, guys. I think it has a lot of advantages. It's worth the extra scrutiny on choosing the system you're going to run an optic with. With that, let's get in a tactical verse of the day. Tactical verse of the day is going to come from Micah. What does the Lord require of you but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God? Men, gunfighters, seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Have a blessed day.